TIBCO, as you can see from the slide, and you'll be very happy to know I'm not here to talk to you about my software company this afternoon. I want to talk to you about a new opportunity that seems to be blossoming around the big data world. And so while I'm going to talk to you about monetizing data, be aware that we're pretty good at helping companies do that, and I'll talk to you about some themes that fit. But what I really want to talk to you about is this gap that's kind of grown for all of us. You know, you're here and you're listening to people talk about different types of technologies that helps you collect every ounce of data that's in your enterprise, and I think that that's rather important. But the problem is that we're not spending enough time and energy making sure that we're managing it so that we can turn it into revenue sources, not just a source for analytics or operational workloads, but a way to actually look at it as a true business asset. And right now we're in the middle of a continuum, a process that almost everybody in this room has kind of undergone. Back in the 90s, Don Tapscott wrote this really great book about the digital economy and how connectedness and the internet was going to change everything. And it did. And it kind of gave way to this big data boom and this new theme of digital transformation. And if your company is doing digital transformation and you've made multi-million-dollar investments in big data infrastructures, you're now sitting on all kinds of data and an opportunity to do something rather interesting with it. And monetizing that data is the theme of this conversation today, and I think it's something that's important that you ought to be thinking about as you look at the data assets that are within your company. So you're undergoing some pressures that are kind of interesting right now, and I suspect everybody in the room, if you have a data or an analytic sort of background on what you're doing, you are feeling new pressures from a maturing sort of community of users. They are queuing up in front of your door, asking for greater access to information and wanting to do more with analytics. And they're not afraid of the solutions that are in the marketplace. They want to have their hands on their tools. They want to get the answers when and where they want them. And they're very interested in moving forward on their own. They're not afraid of the disruptive technology that you've made big investments in. There's a lot of people in the audience today here that have done big data spending around Hadoop and around new databases and new technologies that allow you to store all this information. And the reason that we made those investments is on the surface, they looked pretty inexpensive. As a matter of fact, a lot of vendors in the space, they told us it was nearly free to do big data. Is there anybody here that got to do big data for free? Not really, right? It's an expensive endeavor. And the data is the thing that we were after. And it's sort of in a weird way, the data's become all we've been focusing on. And I think that it can really be the fuel for you to recoup and get some return on investment around some of the things that you've done around big data. Analyst firms like IDC will gladly tell you that this particular market is continuing to boom along, it's continuing to grow at a rapid pace, and that companies are going to continue to spend here. And if you're going to spend in this area, and you're going to continue to harvest and hold all this data, I think you ought to have at least some form of strategy or knowledge of how to monetize it. And that's what I'd like to kind of talk about today. So while I think the community adds pressure, the technology adds pressure, the data is a pressure, the economic aspects are important as well, I also think that all of us are sort of under pressure to get some return on these big data investments. And it feels like it felt years ago around enterprise data warehouses. We spent millions of dollars building them, and we had a lot of C-level people asking us, well, what are you going to do for me now that we've built this infrastructure? And we said, oh, we're going to do analytics, and we're going to do this. And then we said, oh, wait, I want to go do big data first. I want to buy some more stuff to hold the data. Patience is running out, and after a decade of infrastructure investments, we're getting a lot of pressure from companies, our bosses, to do things with the data that is real and starts to harvest some revenue and recoup some of the expenses. All the data is now at our fingertips, and I think that we've probably crossed the chasm around what we need to do from a data standpoint, and it's now a time and an opportunity for us to do some interesting things around what we can do to monetize it. This is a picture of the hybrid data ecosystem, and when I was an industry analyst before I joined TIBCO, I used to talk to customers like you about this topic, and if you look around the outside of this chart, you'll see that there's all kinds of different personas that want to get at the data, that want to have access to information, they want to be able to benefit from analytics, and they want to be able to make decisions and move forward, but some of them also want to monetize the information that you have. So orchestrating the data top to bottom within your organization is really important, and those are some of the tools that you're going to need in order to make data available to the outside world as a service and to be able to monetize it. So I recommend that for those of you who have gone a long way through this big data journey, start to look at centers of excellence within your organization so that you can start to open up access to the data and so that you can curate the data. So not only so that you can sort of feed that information to the analytic and operational consumers in your organization, but so that you can also start to look at a way to expose it to the outside world. So this is a little bit bigger picture, and you can see some of these personas, data scientists and BI analysts, IT analysts, business analysts, all of these people are willing and ready to start using data in new ways within your organization. So I recommend that if you haven't sort of assessed their needs, and if you've been hyper-focused on big data infrastructure, start thinking about how these consumers can start to use the data to fuel what they need to do and so that they can look for outside opportunities. So really smart companies are making investments around how to leverage these data assets. They have catalogs in place, they have search in place, and they have data virtualization in place. So in order to go monetize your data and make some money with it, you have to have your architecture house in order, and you have to be ready to do it. And you also have to re-look at what you probably have been ignoring a little bit is some of those MDM and data quality projects, because in order to take your data to the outside world, you really need to make sure that it's clean, well organized, and valuable. So I think that those are sort of at the cornerstone. So you want to make sure that the wider community within your organization is empowered. Make sure that you have the capability to supply data outwards from your big data investment, and make sure that you're empowering the right people, because data monetization is here. The analyst firms around the world are talking about how it's going to impact things. And it's not about always selling data to a consumer. It might be selling data to a partner, or making data available outside the walls of your enterprise, or aggregating data in a way that you can anonymize it and use it to drive other businesses and other relationships within your business. So, a few ways that I see it happening in the space. How many of you are familiar with the Big Data Bike Project? Does anybody subscribe to it? This is a company that was formed, funded, and built for the sole purpose of harvesting data and selling it to cities. So I noticed I've been in London for a few days. As I'm sure you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here. And I've been a little awed by how many bikes I saw around central London. It feels like Amsterdam here. And it's crazy how many bikes are around. This company founded itself in order to harvest data for resale. So what they do is they track how bicyclists are using it in countries and in cities and in different areas. And then their business model is to go out and take that data and help cities and governments better plan roads, better plan parks, and better plan their cities using data from this company. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of the very first firms I've seen that was literally founded with the idea of, we want to harvest information and resell it. And I think it's a great example. Many of you are probably familiar with the John Deere organization. They make big, expensive agricultural tractors for farmers all over the world. And they actually have what's called FarmSight. And this is a great example, and one that you can take away from today's conversation. They're in the tractor business, but what they did is they took a look at the data that they were harvesting from all of their farmers and realized that they could turn that into a monetized product. Using business intelligence and advanced analytics, John Deere is actually able to help farmers become predictive. And they sell this to the farmers as an add-on to their relationship with them. And they cover important things like logistics and uptime and farming performance and agronomics. And these are things that farmers can't do on their own. So it's a great example of monetizing John Deere's information and actually opening up a new line of business to monetize that data to their consumers, to make John Deere even more important to their farmers. They just spent $300 million in September to buy a robot company for tractors. So they're moving towards the point where farmers won't even drive their vehicles anymore. And the analytics and the data that comes from that relationship is going to be key to how John Deere moves into the future. And it's a great example of a company monetizing data to go forward. How many of you have a Mastercard in your pocket? Mastercard has actually opened up a whole brand new line of business where they've got 2.3 billion global cards, 56 billion transactions a year, and they're teaching retailers how to better run their business using aggregated data from their entire ecosystem. So they've been putting this data together and making a subscriber service that includes analytics and access to this huge data pool so that even a mom and pop shop here in London can work with Mastercard to get deep analytic views and actually have a relationship with Mastercard that's advisory and helpful to the way that they need to do their business, not just the relationship that they have with them today for the credit cards. So I think it's a great example, again, of how a company is mining the data it already has and monetizing it to move forward. Another trend that you're going to start to see, and it's already got feet or traction, is this idea of marketplaces, and this is Dawex. They specialize in IoT data for monetization. So they have a framework that allows them to resell data to you as a consumer around manufacturing, IoT, drone, sensor data, and they make it available to the public or to companies like yours to augment the data that you already have. There's Data Republic. They've been in the marketplace for quite some time, and they specialize in highly selective industry-first or industry-focused data so that if you're in the manufacturing sector or retail or insurance or banking, you can go to these guys and they'll be able to sell and give you data that you can use to augment your business, augment your analytics, and drive forward in a more insightful way with data that maybe you didn't already have. Buying more data to sell data is becoming an interesting trend. You may have seen Data Market out there as a data market, and they were one of the leaders in that space. And one of the BI firms that are here on the floor, ClickTech, came along and swooped them up and turned that product actually into a data subscription business at Click. So here's a BI vendor who might be servicing some of you and helping you do better things with your business, and they understand that monetizing data is an important move for them, and they actually went out and bought a data marketplace so that they could make it available to you as a customer. Other folks in the market that have done these types of things, you may have noticed a few years ago, IBM bought the Weather Channel. Weather Channel's fun to watch, but a lot of people sort of scratched their heads and were like, why did IBM buy the Weather Channel? And it became clear after some time that they finally announced this project called Deep Thunder, and Deep Thunder actually was leveraging weather data from 195,000 hobby and micro weather stations that the Weather Channel was attached to. And the reason that they wanted it is macro weather was interesting, micro weather was really valuable. And if you could bring micro readings of what was happening in one neighborhood to another, you could actually affect supply chain for your customers in a more insightful way. You could do inventory control with your customers in a more insightful way. And there's dozens of use cases that come from having highly accurate weather data mixed in with your analytics. And that's exactly why these guys went out and bought themselves a weather TV channel. It wasn't so that they could own the channel and sell commercials. It was so that they could tap into these 190 some odd thousand micro weather stations. So it's fairly innovative. Device-driven things. I'm wearing my iWatch today. It's already talking to me. It taps me on the wrist and tells me how much longer I have to talk. I like that, but it also collects an awful lot of information. And as you probably know, Apple and IBM have been in synced up for a while, where they're starting to collect device information from our phones and from our iWatches and from everything else. There's a reason for that. And one of the goals is to be able to sell that or enhance service products with their customers. This is a great example of how that occurs. This is Cardiogram, an Apple Watch partner. And what they've done recently is they did a study with 6,000 some odd people, and they monitored heartbeats through the watch. And they became extraordinarily accurate with that data. And they were actually got to the point where using deep neural networks, they became 97% accurate in being able to predict if I'm going to have a stroke or a heart episode. That's pretty valuable information. The end game here is to turn that into a data-enhanced service. Think about how insurance companies are going to like that information, and think about how we're all going to personally appreciate it as time goes by. So I think it's fairly interesting to see that even as closed off as healthcare can be, we're already starting to open up the coffers there and starting to monetize data in a meaningful and smart way. Even our governments are interested in this. And I found this very interesting. For most of you, you probably know that open data is becoming a real hot topic, and that government data is made available to all of us to bring into our businesses and to use. Gartner says that by this year alone, 80% of organizations will be incorporating some sort of open data source. So this one isn't so much about money, but it's about openness and being able to leverage a data world to enhance our insights. And I found it very interesting that there's a couple of companies. This one here is in England. And they specialize in providing UK companies with access to government data. So what Dorta's doing is they're taking this open source data, they're augmenting it, they're cleaning it up, they're organizing it, making it super easy for companies to consume and utilize. So if you have an interest in open data, you might start your search with a company like this, especially here in the UK. Socrata is another great example. These folks are productionizing open data. So what they've done is they've created an API layer where companies can tap right into what they're doing. And they're helping governments and cities and municipalities monetize or leverage their data so that it's easier for them to become an open data government, so that they're able to take it forward and then make it available to their sector or to the people in their areas. So this whole idea of collecting all the data so that we have it is very interesting. Being here at a really cool big data conference, very interesting. Spending millions of dollars on big data solutions, a little scary, a little risky, and there's probably some pressure for us to start doing smart things with it. And so if you're in one of these organizations where a lot of money has been spent, a few things for you to take away today. Make sure that you are making data easy. Make sure that data is the foundation and the fuel for analytics, but also the foundation for you to monetize data. The better framework and the better data organization you have, the easier it is for you to expose data to a wider community. Governance, governance, governance. There's a lot of legislation about data coming our way. I'm not going to jump into GDPR today, but it's in May of next year. We have to be careful with what we're doing with data, and you have to make sure that you're ready to follow the new regulations. And as you do that, you're going to have to make some improvements to your infrastructure. And so keep in mind that someday you're going to want to monetize some of this data and do interesting things with it. And as you reclimate your infrastructures, make sure that you have that in your eyes. As I mentioned, data quality and MDM are not sexy topics, but if you want to take your data public and you want to monetize it, you have to be ready to make sure that the data you're giving people is clean and valuable and accurate. Lastly, you want to be able to have some controls and metrics in place so you understand it, and make sure you have the right skill sets to make sure that you can go take advantage and get some serious return on investment from these big data investments we've been making for the last decade. So I thank you for your attention. As a gift, TIBCO, I'm an author and I wrote the book behind me. TIBCO's made about 150 copies of the book available complimentary for free today. And as you exit here, if you want to hang a left and walk down a booth or two, you'll find a table. I'd be happy to sign a free copy of the book if you're interested. I wish you a great day. Don't let your big data investment go unleveraged. Look for ways to monetize data, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much.